Alright, let's see if I can make a video while in the pangs of hunger, for I have not eaten in a long time. So some interesting thoughts today. Thinking about Machiavelli, and one of his sort of positions that sort of like justifies his political philosophy is that you sort of need to actually understand how the world works, how things actually function in terms of when you're dealing with politics and power, when you're dealing with the political battlefield. Sometimes people who have like very moralistic, sort of naive ideas about what is good and what is evil, and then they become rulers. They create a lot of disaster because they don't really understand the sort of the physical reality of how power work actually plays out, and what needs to be done in order to make sure that the country runs effectively and smoothly. And sort of argued that it's sometimes a lot of like things that we would consider very malicious and evil, these are things that are sort of necessary to create security in a nation, stability, security, and essentially to also like whoever is the politician in charge, the governor, he sort of has to do things to protect himself and to protect his allies, because if he's just trying to like follow the letter of what is commonly considered to be good, he's going to probably create a lot of chaos and disaster, and the net effect will be that the nation will be destroyed, and people will suffer because he's like, well, I'm just trying to be a good person, so like why it's like, why doesn't I did the right thing, so I have nothing to be ashamed of, and this fucking burning rubble that is my nation is it's not my fault. I did the good thing. I stuck to my principles firmly and I believed in them, and therefore even though everything is fucked now and I'm gonna get decapitated by this angry mob, it's okay because I did the right thing. So anyhow, so that's sort of like Machiavelli's position and belief about like the necessity for sort of understanding what is in order to be effective, and sometimes what is things that most people would rather not think about. And it's also sort of like the philosophers. It's also it's the philosophers trying to find the right word here. It's his, it's like when you're a philosopher, you have to also, you have to be curious enough to look at the dark side of things to really understand what is, and you have to play with ideas and see, how does this play out when I apply this set of circumstances to it, and what would the result be under these conditions. And so as a philosopher, you're sort of become agnostic about what most people would consider, good and evil, because, we're more interested in the fundamental mechanics and principles that are not, the idea of how things work, but how things actually work in reality under the surface. And so, it's one of the reasons I like Carl Jung and his idea of the shadow and the unconscious, is because, most people, they have some ideal they try to live by, but then underneath it, they get into all sorts of mischief, because they sort of they allow themselves the latitude now to strike out in these sort of ways which they don't fully own, because they're well, I did this set of good things, so now I'm a good person, so who cares if I have this little thing that is just it's just a little thing, it just happens every once in a while. I don't really have any real control over it, and I don't even really log it in my memory, because it's uncomfortable, and I do enough good in the world so that let me have this one little vice, just let me have it. Come on, it's okay, it'll be fine. So, but then that got me thinking about sort of the advantage. I think often we think of evil people, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists. We think of them as sort of running society, and sort of the people who we hate politically. We think of them, or the people who run corporations or whatever, who are these fucking cartoonishly evil, self-centered, villains. We think of them as very powerful because we sort of envy their ability to live without a conscience and to get what they want without any, feeling of remorse or the consequences of, being somebody who feels, negative things when they do negative things to other people. So, what I think is interesting about that is, in a way, and so now I'm gonna invoke Sun Tzu, and why perhaps the sociopaths actually have they have a great weakness, and perhaps are not as powerful as we make them out to be, because they have to function from selfishness, and they sort of have to steal in order to feel good. They because fundamentally they don't have a sense of goodness within themselves, a sense of what is good, and they often have this tremendous feeling of emptiness. And so because they're not really able to have that feeling of goodness, they have to kind of steal it from other people. They can't really enjoy giving something, the joy that it is to give something. They can only take something from somebody else. So they are they have to be carnivorous predators that get their life force from other things, like a vampire, because they don't really have any real life inside of them to give. And so the advantage that I think we have over sociopaths is, in The Art of War, Sun Tzu says, never allow your enemy to fight on the battlefield of his choosing. You fight your enemy on the battlefield that you want to fight. That is advantageous for you. Trick him into thinking you're weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. And so that's how you sort of like get your enemy to fight on the battlefield of your choosing, as you get them to think, okay, he's weak over here, so I'm going to attack him over here. But then it turns out that's like where you have your greatest, fortifications, and, like you have, your best warriors ready for them, because you sort of like tricked your enemy into fighting in that area. And so, a sociopath can't really put themselves fully in our shoes. Someone with empathy, with genuine empathy, they can't really know what it feels like to be motivated by love, motivated by wanting to give naturally. And so they can only sort of imagine what that would be like. And, they're always going to have like a distorted version of, what other people, like if someone is genuinely affectionate and positive and friendly with people, they will only see somebody who's putting on an act, because they wouldn't really know what would motivate a person to be that way other than to get what they want in some kind of Machiavellian way. So they can't really understand what it means to be a decent, person motivated by genuineness. And so like when they see, so you see the super, they say that sociopaths have a superficial charm, so they know how to emulate like some caricature of what is friendly, but they don't really understand. They can only like sort of mechanically reimagine what it's like, based on the like photograph that they have in their head of what, okay, so this person got this kind of response from these people because they put a smile on their face, and then they got something that they wanted. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna like look like I'm happy and friendly, and I'm just like this smarmy fucking asshole, but it seems to kind of work, but it's not really. You can usually, if you have like any good sense, you can sense when someone's being fake, And so like people with actual empathy have this advantage, that they can see more like what is behind other people's behavior. Not only that, the sociopath can't really put themselves in our shoes effectively. But we who have empathy, we can put ourselves in the shoes of a sociopath who is motivated by selfishness, envy, lust, and hatred. Like we can pretty effectively imagine what it's like to be sociopathic in our, because we have the part that they have. We have like all these things, all the selfishness, all those, like, cruelty, anger, jealousy. Like we have all those emotions too. It's just that we have the other half of like the positive emotions where our actions are motivated by love enough that we don't let that other half of us be our motivating, ruling, position, because we, find the goodness within ourselves, and then we function from that goodness, and then the other parts of ourselves, we figure out sort of how to manage them. And so sociopaths are, in a way, they're very predictable because they're always going to do the selfish thing. And once you've like noted, like who is a sociopath, you can kind of like figure out like what it is, like how to maneuver them, how to work around them. Because you can pretty much predict like where they're, you can figure out like what are they motivated by, what is it that they want, because what they want is always like the selfish fucking thing. So they're not very spontaneous, because love, is meeting the needs of the moment. So love is not really easily pinned down and predictable, because you love, when you give out of love, you're giving where it's needed and where it feels good to give that love. And, the sociopath usually has like some, like pattern, some habit, something, some vice, that they continue to keep going back to, because they they have this like dark energy that builds up into them, and then they have to like lash out and take it. And so you can predict like where they're going to strike, because you can start seeing like, okay, this is like what they keep going for, these types of ego gratifications. I can predict, where their next mark is going to be, because they're always sort of like, on a heist, like planning their next heist. And so like we're able to, as someone with empathy, you're able to put yourself in the shoes of that and to see how they think, but they can't actually figure out how it is that we think, because we're not fundamentally motivated by the same thing. But we do have that part of ourselves where we could, sort of shut off our emotions to see what a sociopath would think like. And so we can kind of like predict, where the next battlefield is that they want to fight on, because they're always going to want to fight for the things that they want, because they can't help but go exactly to the same places, to the same watering hole over and over again, because they have to, like, they're addicted to their gratification in those areas. And once you like take it away from them, now you have control over the sociopath. If you are like the ruler over like where it is that they're gonna feed, they can't bite the hand that feeds them, essentially. So you're choosing the battlefield, and by knowing like where they want to go to get their satisfaction, you can learn to like maneuver around them and control them and not let them get under your skin, because that's what they're like trying to do, like they're like trying to study you and figure out like what makes you tick, superficially, but on a deeper level, they can't really grasp what it is that motivates, a person who is motivated by love. Anyhow, so just some interesting thoughts. I'll leave it here. Have a good one.